welcome to a new video. This is about the connotation of a poem, which is The Cold Within, and the poet is James Patrick Kinney. Now, this poem is pretty useful for IB board, for CBSE students as well, who are talking about like understanding the poem and doing its analysis. It's useful for writing PEAL paragraphs in IB board. So this goes for grade 7th, 8th, 9th, right? And understanding the poem, it's very important. So let's discuss. So basically, this is a powerful poem that conveys a deep message about the destructive nature of prejudice, greed, and lack of compassion. So now you have to understand that the theme of the poem, The Cold Within, is first is prejudice. So prejudice is kind of like having a stereotype, and a stereotype is when you have like a preconceived notion about someone. For example, all people of a certain group are bad only because one person acted that way. That is a stereotype, right? So, a stereotype and a prejudice are very similar. It's like having an opinion about a certain group, and you kind of assume and generalize the whole group on the basis of that opinion. So, that is a stereotype, or it's very similar to a prejudice. Then there is greed. So greed, it's selfishness, right? So we'll say that greed is selfishness. And there is a lack of compassion, like lack of humanity and lack of a willingness to help someone else. That is the feeling of compassion. So we say all human beings should be compassionate. This is what we are talking about. Now, if you understand the poem, so this gives you like a summary of what the poem is basically about. If you wish to write it, you can take down some notes. And it's talking about how there are six individuals in the poem. Each of them is holding a stick of wood, and they're trapped in a situation where they could share their sticks to keep a fire burning and stay warm. So, six people are there and they're trapped in a place where it is very cold, and they could share their sticks and keep themselves warm. They can protect themselves from getting hurt due to the cold. But they refuse to share their stick. For what reasons? For selfish reasons, whether it is based on race, class, religious intolerance, or personal prejudice. So, religious intolerance is based on the basis of religion, they refuse to share the stick, or they have some kind of personal opinion about a certain thing. So, the poem it has basically mentioned all of these aspects. Now, in the end, their willingness to help each other leads to their demise. Demise means like death or end of something, not from the cold outside but from the cold within. So the cold within is basically lack of compassion, as it is mentioned up there. So this is lack of compassion, lack of feeling a sense of helping the other person out. Now, if you were to talk about this poem like stanza by stanza, let's see. So first stanza is basically talking about the opening of the scene where six people are there who are metaphorically. Now, metaphor is one of your poetic devices which talks about relating or comparing something with something else. They are trapped not just by cold weather but by their own prejudices and selfishness. So the metaphor is being trapped in certain place, and the trap is not because they are cold but because of their own stereotypes about the situation, their own selfishness. Each has a piece of wood, symbolizing the potential to contribute to the warmth and survival of the group. Right? So all of them Six humans, like it says, each one possessed a stick of wood. All of them had the stick of wood that they needed to survive in the cold. Like they could have just burned the stick and they would have enough warmth to survive through the cold. But they refused to because of their own prejudice, because of their own opinions. They didn't want to. Now we'll see what are these opinions. So if you see the second stanza, it says that the first man held his back for a faces round the fire. He noticed one was black. So basically, the first man in that group notices that one of the other person was black in color, like his skin color was black, and he refuses to give up his stick because of racial prejudice. So this is where racism is very prevalent in the poem. He notices that one of the group members is black and chooses not to contribute, letting his prejudice dictate his actions. It is very simple and stanza by stanza throughout the poem you understand these instances. For example, if you see now, for second we have done third stanza. The next man looking across the way saw one not of his church and couldn't bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. So the second person is prejudiced against someone of a different religion. So it mentions church. That means, the next person in the group, he looked at one of the people in that group and he realized that person is not a believer of like Jesus Christ. He was not Christian. So this person, after realizing that, refused to give his stick. Birch is a type of wood. It is a type of wood. Okay. So he refused to give his stick because someone in the group had a different religion. He was not a Christian. He withhold his stick because he sees that one of the others do not share his faith. This is talking about religion, showing intolerance. So he was not okay with that. He was not okay with someone else being of some other religion. In this whole situation, it's very prevalent that the cold temperature was the one thing they should be worried about. But no, they were kind of blinded by all of these little discriminations that they were having. Then your stanza 4 says, the third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should he why should his lock be put to use to warm the idle rich? So the third person, he was poor because he was wearing tattered clothes. Tattered means like torn or kind of destroyed in a way. So he was wearing tattered clothes, and this was a poor man. He saw that one of the people in that group was wealthy, he was rich, and he refused to give his stick because he doesn't want to help someone he perceives as rich and idle. Idle is when someone is doing nothing. That is idle. So he thought, why would I give my stick to someone who wastes his time and does nothing? Okay, so that is why he refuses to give the stick. So here it's a scene of poor and rich, and the poor refuses to give the stick to rich. So this is a socio economic divide on the basis of someone's income. We are making a divide and we're having such prejudices. Then stanza 5, the rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store. Okay, the wealth he had in store then, and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. So there was one rich man also, obviously, and he noticed the poor person. So now the rich refused to share his um, stick with the poor guy. So the poor didn't want to share with the rich, and rich didn't want to share with the poor. So the fourth person is wealthy and is consumed with greed. He refuses to give his stick because he believes the poor are lazy and undeserving of his help, because he thinks that the poor people, he's just so lazy, he's so undeserving. That's why he doesn't give him the stick. Okay, and he's very wealthy. Now, if we go to stanza 6, the black man's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from his side. For all he saw in his stick of food was a chance to spite the white. Spite means to hate or like having negative feelings towards someone. That is spite. So now this talks about revenge, revenge of the black man towards the white one. So initially, the white man noticed that someone in that group was black. So why should I give my stick to a black guy? Now black person saw that, he saw the racism and he replicates the same emotion towards the white, refuses to share the stick with the white. It's a sense of resentment and revenge. Okay? Resentment is like loathe someone, or in a way hate someone, you can say. Okay, so he refuses to give up his stick because he sees it as a way to get back at the white man for the injustices he had faced. So this is a way of stooping low to the level of the white guy. So black man was not being the bigger person, he was rather stooping to the same level. Because this person was white, he refused to share the stick. Okay, it was from the act of revenge. Then stanza 7. And the last man of this forlorn group did not accept for gain, giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. The last person of the group, he refused to share because he was purely motivated by self interest. That means he wanted to get something back in return if he would give his stake. So he was like give and take kind of a guy. Stanza 8, their locks held tight in death still hands was a proof of human sin. So all of these instances they have mentioned, it's about how human beings are sinning and how things are, like how they are letting these um, prejudices, this discrimination get into the way. They didn't die from the cold without, they died from the cold within. So these two lines are very powerful to show that it is the reason why they died was because of their prejudice, because of their lack of compassion, lack of understanding towards the other person in the group. That is why they died. So they ultimately die not because of the cold weather but because of their internal coldness. Their lack of compassion, understanding, and willingness to share, the cold within symbolizes the deadly consequences of their selfishness and prejudice. Now, this part just talks about what are the themes in the poem, and the conclusion is basically like a summary of what we have discovered so far. Okay, so I hope that the connotation of the poem was clear to you. If there was any doubt anywhere, feel free to let me know and comment in the chat box.